I spent 30 years in tech, and I know that a system crash is never an accident. It's the result of unpatched bugs. I watched the Netflix show Adolescence, and while everyone else is arguing about whether it's toxic or propaganda, I'm looking at the crash logs. That boy didn't fail because he was bad. He failed because he was running a corrupted build with no firewall and no admin support. If you haven't seen the show, here's what you need to know. A 13-year-old boy in the UK kills a classmate. The show follows the aftermath. The interrogation, the family, the school, the system trying to figure out what happened. And the show is good. It's well made. The acting is real. The interrogation room scenes hit like a sledgehammer. But here's what everyone is missing while they argue about whether the show is pro-feminist or anti-male. The show is a crash report. It's a detailed scene-by-scene log of a human operating system that failed because nobody patched the bugs. And if you read the crash logs with the right framework, you can see exactly where the build broke down, exactly what was missing, and exactly what could have prevented it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the crash logs, not to judge the boy, not to take a political side, to show you the 4 bugs that destroyed this system, and to give you the patch that the show deliberately never offers. Because a diagnosis without a prescription is just despair, and despair doesn't fix anything. Bug 1, the drift. Look at the boy before the crash. What do you see? A kid with no direction, no identity that he built himself, no skills he's proud of, no evidence in his own life that he's competent, capable, or valuable. His offline world is a null value. Nothing in his day-to-day existence gives him a reason to believe in himself that's based on something real. Not a grade on a test someone else designed, not a like on a post someone else scrolled past, not a participation trophy someone else handed him. Real evidence, something he built, something he solved, something that tested him and he passed. This is the drift diagnostic from my book, Breaking the Drift. The state of having no internal code. When a man, or a boy becoming a man, has zero evidence-based confidence, his system is running on empty. And an empty system doesn't just sit there idle. It goes looking. It searches for the identity the way a starving man searches for food, desperately, uncritically grabbing whatever's closest. And what's closest in 2026 isn't a mentor. It isn't, a father sitting at the kitchen table. It isn't a coach or a teacher or an older man who's been through it. What's closest is the algorithm. And the algorithm doesn't care about that boy's sovereignty. The algorithm cares about engagement. The boy went looking for identity in the manosphere because his offline life gave him nothing to build on. His promises kept ratio was at 0. Not because he was lazy, but because nobody ever taught him the concept. Nobody showed him that confidence comes from keeping commitments to yourself, that identity is built from evidence, that a man's operating system needs data to run on. He was a blank system waiting to be programmed. And the first thing that got to him was the worst possible code. That's not the boy's fault. That's a systems failure. An operating system without internal code will always get overwritten by whatever external code reaches it first. And in the current server environment, the external code that reaches teenage boys first is almost always the most extreme, the most algorithmically optimized, and the most destructive. Because rage content gets clicks, and clicks are the only metric the platform cares about. Bug 2, malware injection. The boy's radicalization wasn't a choice. I need you to hear that. It was an infection. His system had no firewall, and a sophisticated malware package, Manosphere rage content, served at increasing intensity by a recommendation algorithm designed to maximize watch time, entered his operating system and began rewriting his code. This is a failure of cognitive security from my book, Fortress of the Mind. The boy had no analog anchor, no 1 hour daily practice of zero input silence where his own unmediated thoughts could surface. He had no protected partition in his cognitive architecture where external scripts couldn't reach. His attention, the most valuable resource a human system has, was wide open 24 hours a day to whatever the algorithm decided to inject. And here's the thing about algorithmic radicalization that the show gets right, but most commentary gets wrong. It's not that the boy went looking for extreme content. It's that the algorithm served it to him incrementally. That's how the injection works. He watched one video about masculinity. Reasonable enough. The algorithm noted the engagement. It served another, slightly more intense. He watched it. The algorithm escalated. Within weeks, the recommendation engine had walked him from how to be more confident to women are the enemy, to full-blown incel ideology. Not because the boy chose that trajectory, but because each step on the ladder had a slightly higher engagement probability than the last. And the platform's optimization function doesn't distinguish between this content is helpful and this content is radicalizing a child. I helped build engagement systems like this. I know the architecture. And I can tell you that a 13-year-old with no firewall, no admin oversight, and no internal code to resist the injection is the most vulnerable target on the server. His brain is still in development. His identity is still forming. His capacity to critically evaluate incoming information is years away from maturation. And we handed him a device that connects him directly to the most sophisticated persuasion engines ever built with zero protection, and then acted surprised when the malware took hold. Let me describe what the escalation ladder actually looks like inside the algorithm, because this is the part that parents and educators don't understand. The platform doesn't show the boy an incel recruitment video on day one. It shows him a video about confidence, reasonable content, maybe even good content. He watches it. The algorithm logs. This user engages with male confidence content. Next session, it serves something slightly edgier, a video about why nice guys finish last. Still within the mainstream. The boy watches. The algorithm logs. User engages with male grievance content. Engagement duration higher. The targeting refines. Next session. The truth about modern women. More intense. More oppositional. Higher engagement. Higher watch time. The algorithm is not thinking. It has no ideology. It is simply running an optimization function. Serve the content that maximizes seconds on platform. And anger, resentment, and victimhood outperform curiosity, nuance, and growth every time in every A/B test on every platform. The math is rigged against the boy. By week 3, the recommendation engine has moved him from self-help to ideology. By week 6, the ideology has become identity. He's not watching content anymore. He's consuming doctrine. And the doctrine gives him something his empty offline life never did. A narrative. A story about who he is, why he's in pain, and who to blame. The narrative is wrong. The narrative is destructive. But it's the first coherent operating code the boy has ever received. And an empty system doesn't evaluate the quality of the code. It just runs whatever loads first. The analog anchor wouldn't have been enough on its own, but it would have been a start. 1 hour a day of silence. 1 hour where the algorithm couldn't reach him. 1 hour where his own thoughts, however undeveloped, however confused, had room to surface without being overwritten by content designed to exploit his insecurity. That hour is the firewall, and nobody installed it. Bug 3, the unpatched monster, the violence, the part everyone focuses on, the part that makes the show visceral and the debate nuclear. Here's what the crash logs show. The boy had a monster. Every man does, every boy does. Aggression, the capacity for violence, the raw biological firmware that evolution installed to handle physical threats, territorial challenges, and social dominance conflicts. And that firmware isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the survival code that kept the species alive for 200,000 years. But like any powerful system, it requires training, it requires a sheath. This is the shadow integration from my book Monster by Design, the Monster by Design protocol. When a man trains his capacity for aggression through physical discipline, through martial arts, through controlled exposure to competition and conflict, the monster becomes an integrated tool, a drawn sword with a disciplined hand on the hilt. The man can feel the anger, can feel the power, and can choose how and when to deploy it. That's the sheath. That's the integration. The sword is deadly. The sheath makes it sovereign. The boy had no sheath. Nobody trained his monster. Nobody taught him how to channel aggression through physical discipline. Nobody gave him a martial art, a competitive sport, a physical practice that would let him feel powerful in a controlled environment so the power didn't have to find an uncontrolled exit. The monster sat in his system, untrained, unacknowledged, building pressure with no release valve. And when the malware, the rage ideology, connected to that untrained monster and told it, here's a target, here's a reason, here's permission, the system crashed. The monster glitched. And a girl died. The show diagnoses this perfectly. It shows you the pressure building. It shows you the isolation, the rage, the distorted logic. What the show never does, and this is the critical gap, is offer the sheath. It shows you the sword exploding. It never shows you what a properly sheathed sword looks like. It never says, here's how a boy learns to be dangerous and disciplined at the same time. Because the show doesn't have that framework. The show is a warning. It's a crash report. It's not a patch. I have the patch. I wrote 21 books about it. And the patch starts with this. The boy needed a physical practice that taught him he was capable of danger and capable of restraint simultaneously. Boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, something where a more experienced man, a coach, a sensei, a training partner, modeled for him what controlled power looks like. You're strong enough to hurt me. You chose not to. That choice is the virtue, not the weakness. That's shadow integration. That's the monster by design. And it's the one thing nobody in this boy's life thought to install. Bug 4, the missing admin of the absent father. The show handles this with devastating subtlety. The father is there physically. He shows up to the police station. He sits in the waiting room. But he's absent architecturally. He doesn't know what his son watches online. He doesn't know what ideologies are being injected. He doesn't know the first thing about the informational environment his child is living in. He's an admin who hasn't logged into the server in years. This is a failure of strategic vetting. From my book, Strategic Brotherhood. In my framework, strategic vetting means treating every input, every relationship, every information source, every influence as a recruitment decision. What gets access to the system? What gets filtered out? Who has permission to write code that runs on this operating system? The father's job wasn't to spy on his son. It wasn't to install parental controls and call it handled. His job was to be the primary source of code, to be the man whose influence was so consistent, so present, so architecturally embedded, that the algorithm's malware had to compete with a strong signal rather than flood an empty channel. A boy whose father is actively writing his operating code, teaching him, training him, modeling for him what it means to be dangerous and disciplined, competent and controlled. That boy doesn't need the manosphere to tell him who he is. He already has an identity. It was built at the kitchen table, in the garage, on the training mat, in the hard conversations that fathers are supposed to have, and increasingly don't. I'll tell you what an active admin looks like, because I think most fathers genuinely don't know. An active admin isn't a friend, isn't a buddy, isn't the cool dad who plays video games with his kid and calls it bonding. An active admin is the man who sits down at the table on a Tuesday night and says, "Show me what you're watching online." Not to punish, to understand, to know what code is being loaded into his son's system so he can either validate it, challenge it, or replace it with better code. An active admin is the man who takes his son to the gym, puts a barbell in his hands, and says, "I'm going to teach you what your body can do." An active admin is the man who, when his 13-year-old comes home angry about something a girl said at school, doesn't dismiss it and doesn't validate the rage. He sits with the boy and says, "Tell me what happened, and I'll show you 3 ways to think about it." He's competing with the algorithm by being a more present, more credible, more trustworthy source of code. And the algorithm, for all its sophistication, cannot beat a father who shows up consistently, because the algorithm doesn't love the boy. The father does. And love, when it shows up with competence and consistency, is the strongest code on any server. The admin was offline, the server ran unmonitored, and the malware wrote itself into the root directory because nobody was there to catch it. So here's the prescription. The patch the show never offers. For the boys currently in the drift, install the 90-day OS, start tracking the promises kept ratio, build evidence-based confidence, one kept commitment at a time, give the system internal code so it doesn't need external code to run. For the boys being algorithmically hijacked, install the analog anchor, 1 hour a day, 0 input, build the firewall. And for the adults around them, parents, coaches, mentors, audit the informational inputs. Know what's entering the system, not to censor, but to compete. Be a louder signal than the algorithm. For the boys with an untrained monster, get them into physical training, something combative, something where controlled aggression is practiced and rewarded. Build the sword, then build the sheath. Let them feel their own power in an environment where a more experienced man shows them what discipline looks like from the inside. For the absent admins, log back in. I don't care how uncomfortable it is. I don't care if the boy pushes back. Your discomfort is irrelevant compared to what happens when the server runs unmonitored. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be present. Present means you're writing code that competes with the algorithm. Absent means the algorithm writes unopposed. The show Adolescence is a warning. A crash report from a system that failed because every protection mechanism that could have been in place was not. The show is not feminist propaganda. It's not an attack on masculinity. It's an accurate diagnosis of what happens when a boy has no internal code, no firewall, no trained monster, and no admin in a server environment specifically designed to exploit every one of those vulnerabilities. But a diagnosis without a prescription is just despair. And I don't deal in despair. I deal in protocols. The Sovereignty OS is the prescription. It's the patch. And every bug the show identified has a fix in the stack. The show told you what went wrong. I'm telling you how to make sure it doesn't happen again. Install the patches, build the firewall, train the monster, log back in as admin, because the next crash isn't theoretical. It's loading right now on a 13-year-old's phone, and nobody's reading the error messages. And I want to say something directly to the men my age, the dads, the uncles, the coaches, the older brothers. Every time one of these crashes happens, the conversation turns into a debate about ideology. Was it the left's fault? Was it the right's fault? Is masculinity toxic or under attack? And while that debate generates 10 million views and changes absolutely nothing, another boy somewhere is sitting alone in his room, running on empty, with a phone full of malware and no admin in sight. The debate is the distraction. The patch is the work. Stop arguing about who's to blame and start installing the code that prevents the next crash. The boy in the show was not a monster. He was a system without architecture. And when a system has no architecture, any code can run on it, including the code that ends in catastrophe. That's not a political statement. That's an engineering fact. Build the architecture, prevent the crash. That's the job. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It keeps the motor running. And if you'd like to learn more, check out my books on Amazon or click the links below.